So in terms of the education pathways, just a bit of a summary about FASEA. So FASEA is required to issue the standards and the code of ethics, and all financial advisors must comply with those standards. So basically, essentially, the standards are the education framework, the professional year, the exam, and assessment of foreign qualifications, the treatment and the naming of the provisional provider, and continuing professional development. At the baseline of all of this is the code of ethics. So it basically is like the foundation in order to achieve better advised outcomes to build consumer trust and confidence. All right. Sorry, I've got too many things on the screen. I don't know if I can move this across. When I looked at the questions, I thought I would split this up because I'm getting questions about existing advisors in the network and also about businesses that are thinking about commencing a professional year. This is a brief recap. You have CPD, which has already become law since January, the Code of Ethics, which becomes law in January 2020. You must pass the exam by January 2021 and you must complete the educational standard. The exam, as we all know, the first exam is in June, and we have exams also in September and December that have already been announced. Click. All right. The Corporations Act is the guiding force for everyone. So FASEA must, by legislative instrument, approve the degrees and the equivalent qualifications under Section 921U of the law. The problem that we have is that the instrument hasn't been updated since December 2018. And there is publication that is continuously occurring on FASEA's website, which is updating pretty much daily. There are draft amendments, the graduate diplomas, the new RPLs that have been recently announced are not yet legislated. And FASEA is not, under corporations law, required to determine whether an advisor has satisfied the education requirements or report on those education requirements to ASIC. The universities and the higher education providers, they have to comply with the RPL rules set by FASEA and the rules also set by ASQA and by TESQA. All licensees are responsible for assessing and reporting whether an advisor has met the education and training standards. It's not the responsibility of FASEA, the universities or Kaplan, with advisors needing to basically achieve all these requirements within the set timeframes set in corporations law. So this sort of gives us sort of a bit of a bind screen. Right, in that FASEA is publishing information which is not currently built into the law. So what you are looking at now is as a few days ago, FASEA's Education Pathways tool for Australian-based qualifications. If you look at the bottom, there is a very significant disclaimer that applies to anyone who was to use the FASEA Education Pathways tool, where basically FASEA says that they disclaim full responsibility for the output of the tool and they reserve the right to change the question of the tool. So in answer to your question, Lawsy, the AFINIA approach is a double management approach. I will look at it on the behalf of AFINIA. Kaplan will also look at it. We will sit there and compare the results of our individual assessments, which are done individually at a transcript level. We'll also compare like our interpretation of FASEA's law as it currently stands and our understanding of how that law would be applied in order to determine the mapping. But of course, as advisors, you're also able to access FASEA's Education Pathways tool, but you need to be conscious that that tool is a moving target. Yeah.
Now, Vanissa, I'm talking the camera up. We've got a bit of a height difference here, so excuse me with the camera angle. But I know a lot of advisors who have done a lot of prior study have been a little bit concerned that some of those recognitions may not be sort of realised. So we had a question is, are the qualification assessments finalised or can we expect changes down the track?
We are expecting changes along the track. Right? Now, this RPL rule only applies to existing advisors. These are advisors who are on the FAR register for at least one day between 2016 and 2018 and were not bound by an EU. FASEA recently also published that they reserve the right to not be bound by any RPL that is awarded outside the TESCA rules. So there's a bit of a number of different ways to consider it. You need to look at it in terms of both coursework or designation. Now, feedback that has been provided informally is that there will be a close date in terms of new completions of the advanced diploma, given that you can concurrently still do the advanced diploma. And there's also feedback in terms of further progression of different types of CFP, and also in terms of the applications that have been made by the different industry bodies. So, for example, you can see there are multiple types of CFP that have been applied for. CPA, CA, FASEA, the Fellow Chartered Financial Practitioner. I do know that they've only approved the Kaplan version at this stage, and that AFA are trying to find the rest of the documentation for that Fellow Chartered Financial Practitioner. I know that the CA has a very strong argument on the basis of that recent CAs were at AQF 8, which is above degree level, so they may be able to achieve accreditation, but again, there is no confirmation or rejection by FASEA. In relation to the Graduate Diploma of Applied Finance and Investment, the FASEA recently announced the approval of the Diploma of Financial Advising and the Diploma of Financial Markets that were originally provided by the Securities Institute. These were the precursor qualifications, so there is a possibility, but I can't guarantee it at this stage, that the additional RPL rules will come into play. So for advisors who have these sort of qualifications and so forth, what my recommendation is initially to basically commence with at least the ethics subject, because the ethics subject will apply to all advisors in the network.
A couple of questions. I think you answered those there. Should I wait for further exemptions from the CPA, etc.? And another one, I know there's a lot of advisors who are thinking of delaying the start of their study to maybe perhaps wait to see if their existing studies will be recognised, and it might reduce the amount of study that they need to do. So we had a question that was, if I were to start my studies in early 2020, would this be an issue?
I think it comes down to your decision making in terms of when you wish to undertake the exam and the exam rules, the subject offerings that will be made relative to the subjects that you need to do. So in the original education mapping that was provided, I've given you an indication of the core subjects that you would need to complete. They won't necessarily be offered every semester or trimester. Deakin applies a trimester rule, so there are only pretty much three shots at the cherry in any year. Kaplan does 6 terms, but they will not be offering those same subjects every term or every trimester. Different rules will apply to the different education providers. The key is to think about the question of the exam. So in front of you are the exam sitting dates and the registration periods. These are what were recently announced by FASEA on their website. I have bolded the first day of the registration period because the exam there's no guarantee that the exam will be sat every day in every location. There will only be 2 sittings of the exam, and this time period for the exam will also include the weekends. So you have to think about when you're going to tackle the exam. The other thing which I can't really not emphasise enough, and it's just from a personal perspective, you also need to consider for yourselves your personal and your business needs. I don't know if I'm highly unusual in this, but I found it a bit of a challenge doing to work, look after my children and also study for the exam. So this is a question in terms of starting your studies. Please think about when you're going to do the exam, what your needs are and what sort of the number of subjects that you need to do and your preferred provider.
I know a couple of advisors that have already just locked away the first hour and a half every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday for the next X amount of years to get the study done. They've got a fair amount of study, not just for the exam, but for the university qual to get the grad dip. So you've got to lock the time away somewhere. Probably a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, a little bit from the work environment out of your business, and maybe a little bit on weekends and whatnot, or just get to work early and get it done. All right, so a couple of questions around subject choice. If someone has completed CFP 1, for our FBA friends, ethics and if someone has completed CFP 1, ethics and professional standards subject, would this be treated as recognition of prior learning for the FASEA ethics course?
FASEA have made it very clear that because the new ethics subject, ethics for professional advisors, includes the code and the code monitoring bodies, no RPL will be available for this subject. So unfortunately, even though you've completed, it sounds like you've completed via CFP 1, an ethics subject or an ethical framework subject, you will not be able to get any recognition of prior learning for that subject.
Bubbling up there on the study. We have another question around subject choice that this question needs to complete one bridging unit. Am I correct in saying that if I complete the bridging unit and 4 further units, then I will be eligible to receive my Masters of Financial Planning?
The issue is basically the question of the test score rules. There's a difference between FASEA in terms of its education standard requirement and also in terms of what the test score rules is in terms of the question of the award. So in front of you at the moment you can see a screen that talks about the Masters, the Graduate Diploma, the Graduate Certificate, the Bridging Certificates, and it also talks about the level of difficulty to achieve those subjects. A 6 is below, is an advanced diploma, is below degree level. A Masters is higher than graduate diploma level by basically achieving 12 subjects. Because of the way that it's been structured, and the education providers need to satisfy other rules as well. At best, you might only be able to provide credits, may be able to receive credits within the graduate diploma because that's already been built into the graduate diploma RPL rules for FASEA, but you will not receive credits for any degree studies that have already been completed if you already have a degree because that is an entry requirement to get into a graduate diploma or master's degree unless you are under FASEA rules, but there's no additional credit that I'm aware of that's available. The credits for FASEA do not apply. The credits for FASEA do not go both ways. It is, you get credit for the CFP that you've completed in terms of your FASEA requirement, but that doesn't reduce your requirement under the CFP. Right. So the CFP is looking at essentially 5 subjects. A fellow chartered financial practitioner 4. An SMSF, SSA, which has 1 credit, is 1 subject.
I can see Rachel has thrown one into the chat room, which is on the same sort of topic. Do I need to complete studies before attempting the exam? And Rachel's had a question along the same thing. Should we complete the before completing the exam?
Okay. In terms of looking at the June exam, we have had 3 advisors complete the June exam, and I've spoken to 2 out of the 3 at this particular stage. The feedback from the exam is that there are a number of key things that you need to know, right? In the yellow, which are the core knowledge areas which are applied to both the degrees and the graduate diploma, you'll note that there is ethics, financial advice and behavioural finance. Those are the 3 core elements that are being built into FINEA's education forum. What you need to do, though, is be conscious that the question that everyone has had difficulty with is when they are handling a case study, they will be asked the question of whether or not the advice or the behaviour would be considered both ethical and also not ethical. And they need to be able to explain how they came to that judgment. So in terms of whether or not you need to complete studies before you do the exam, I would look at it and say, do you need to do studies anyway in order to achieve your education requirement? Yes. Do you want to do the reading so that you can approach the ethical framework with confidence? That's another alternative. But if you've got all that, if you understand this in full, then I don't necessarily think that you need to do the studies. I think you need to do some exam support, such as the Education Forum or some of the reading material.
Yes. At the PD day, Marcus took a photo of all the printouts of the reading material. It was 5 or 6 full, those thick ring-bound folders full of reading material. So fair bit to get through. Definitely would advise everyone to get onto it pretty early. Yeah.
I mean, also in terms of the question of the reading material, FASEA, I know some of your business coaches have provided you with the reading material list. You would need to look very carefully at the objectives that are set in the reading material. Those are the questions. We're aware of some of the questions. Those are some of the questions that we'll handle during the September workshop. If you focus on the objectives, when you're applying your reading material, you should be able to handle it. I'm aware that there will be 15 advisors who will be applying for the September exam as at this particular stage. I just thought I'd chuck that one in. And I will be closing the study group list on Monday so that I can provide them with the best support.
Right, getting on to education providers. So obviously a lot of people now are thinking about where to go to obtain their further qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
So which universities and RTOs, actually I don't know if RTOs can actually provide it, you can expand on that, are offering the bridging program, and do we have a list with fee structures and course program guidelines?
Okay, apologies for this slide being a bit slow. We're able to email you this slide. This slide was completed by the FBA and was recently updated. As you can see the names of the universities, the pricing, and you can also see at that arrow, on the arrow, the bridging courses that are available as at this particular point if you would like to choose another education provider. Yeah, these are the rack rates. These are the rack rates. So like Kaplan's rack rate for its graduate diploma and bridging course is $2,400. Affinia has negotiated $1,500 per bridging course or graduate diploma unit. Deacon's pricing there of $3,250 is subject to a 10% discount if you are with Affinia. That would also apply if you were to complete Deacon's workshops, which are not yet announced, plus a residential fee.
Yeah. When Vanessa said Affinia has organised those discounts, it's mainly been Vanessa that's organised those discounts for you. So if you need to do 4 subjects on the Kaplan World, she saved you $4,000. Take wine, beer, champagne as payment for that, Vanessa.
Whiskey day.
Right, so I've got 2 questions left. So if you've got any questions, please fire them through on the chat box. Just send it to all participants so I can access it on the other computer. Now, obviously with the FASEA requirements, there's the introduction of the professional year for new entrants. So can you explain what are the requirements to commence a professional year, i.e. will I need to have RG 146, Tier 1 and 2 qualifications before starting?
Okay. In terms of the education pathway for new entrants, these are people who were not listed on the fire register between 2016 and 2018, or for advisors who do not pass the exam on the 1st of January 2021. the first thing that they need to do is complete a FASEA approved bachelor degree or above. That is essentially, if you don't already have a degree, 24 subjects, or if you have an Australian approved degree, 8 subjects for a graduate diploma. The RPL can only be decided by university rules. There is a 50% limit that has been set by FASEA. For these entrants, there is no RPL available from FASEA for the ADFP or equivalents, or for the approved designations. After that element has been completed, then they are able to apply with an advisor, a supervising advisor, to undertake a professional year, and we will need to notify FASEA that they are a new entrant to the industry. We'll also need to provide ASIC notification to make a change to the file register, and client notification. They need to essentially complete the first 6 months of the professional year and then undertake the exam. Unfortunately, because of the way that the exam has been structured, it could be up to 10 to 12 weeks to receive the result. They cannot commence the second half of the professional year until the exam result indicating a pass has been achieved. So that essentially means that with the advisor will have a minimum lapse time of approximately 15 months to complete a professional year before they could officially become a financial planner, not even taking into account the requirements of the professional year.
Very good. All right, so I'm down to the last question. Any more questions that you've got, please fire them through on the chat box straight away, or forever hold your peace.
Yeah.
Around the new entrant pathway, is there an application process required to undertake the professional year?
The application process will initially we haven't got an official application process at this particular stage. The first thing that we would need to say in order to consider it is that there's been completion of a FASEA approved qualification in full at this stage. Going back to the question about RG146 and RG146, the Advanced Diploma of Financial Planning, officially speaking, since we've basically had these new rules, RG146 officially doesn't exist. We have, however, got a code of ethics, and in that code of ethics there are requirements in terms of competence in terms of maintaining and applying a high level of relevant knowledge and skills, and also applying advice in that particular regard. So when we look at the question of the FASEA subjects, we look at the question of authorisations across AFINIA. We'll be looking for basically mapping of what you have studied, which may or may not be included in your FASEA subject that you've undertaken. So as an example, when you look at the FASEA requirements in terms of financial advice, we cannot clearly see necessarily that gearing advice has been completed. So some people will still need to do additional gearing qualifications.
Very good. Well, we'll throw it. We've got a question here from Lucy. Is the FASEA exam the same subject as the financial advice, regulatory and legal obligations subject set by FASEA?
No, unfortunately, Lucy, it isn't. The FASEA exam covers all three key elements of legislative legal requirements, which is corporations law, TASA, Privacy Act, AML, CTF, plus it also covers behavioural finance in terms of financial advice construction. It covers ethics, it covers ethical frameworks, including the code and the code monitoring bodies, so it's actually quite broad.
Question from Craig. What's the best way to apply to join study groups? You mentioned that closing Monday to sit the exam in September.
Craig, if you can send me an email, that would be terrific. I'll make it easy for you because I've got a really long surname. Just send it to cpd@afinia.com.au and I will add you to the study group. for those who are going for the exam in September. It would be the best approach, yeah.
All right, I'll give you a couple of seconds. If you've got any other questions, please fire them through. Otherwise, we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes. So, just a quick one. Without notice, I guess most of our advisors have somewhere between 3 and 5 subjects to complete. 3 being the bridging course, and 5 maybe if you've got some sort of RG 146 level behind you. How long do you think it would take if you had to do 5 subjects to do university? So am I doing something semester, or is it
yeah, university is providing a subject essentially once every, it's a trimester situation, so you can maximum generally for a university is 3 subjects per year. If you're with Kaplan, it's up to 6. In terms of the question of the exam, I should mention, someone's raised the question about the exam. The exam has a number of different rules to it. The first rule is that basically in the exam, a pass must be completed by January 2021. If you were to sit the exam in September, because of FASEA's marking structure, you will not be able to necessarily complete the exam in December. So people who may not pass in September, their next attempt of the exam will be February. So for most people, depending on when they complete, they would basically get usually three attempts. If you're in December, you will be able to have 3 attempts. It's just the way that they marked those ethical framework questions. They need to be adjusted. The exam mark is 65 to 74%, and the exam will be adjusted for the difficulty of the exam.
Okay. Well, I know in terms of further training, we've got a couple of workshops that are still coming up. So I know Sam's travelling around the country with Marcus and the team to run through some sessions over the next week and a bit. So hopefully everyone is attending those. We've also got the full day before the conference that is going to be facilitated by Deakin to really have an intensive day of exam preparation. So we're hoping that we've had 3 that have already started or done the exam. We've got another 15 or so in September. It's really our aim as a licensee to have every senior advisor complete the exam by December, at least the first attempt. So that's, I think, about the 15th of December is the December exam, roughly.
Yeah.
And that's going to give you plenty of time to have at least 2 more attempts should you need them in the next year. So if there's any more questions.
Yeah, there are questions. Lucy's got a question. So if you sit the exam in December, and unfortunately, Lucy, I do not believe that you'll be able to resit in February. It'll be the next round will be April, if you because of the way that they basically did the marking. It's they told the licensees it would be 12 weeks. The licensees are trying to get the rules changed and so forth so that people could at least apply to sit the exam and get the result. But at this point, the rule has not changed. That result must be clear before you can apply to actually make the application to sit the next exam. Any other questions?
No, none that have come through. Well, what we might do then, unless any questions come through as we're wrapping up. Did you want to finish?
Yeah, I was just going to finish on this slide. If you want additional information, I've given you some of the links that are here in terms of like the website, the legislative instrument, qualification service, the foreign qualifications route, and the approved course provider. I've also provided some information. I appreciate some of you running quite significant practices, and everyone's got a different thing, a different scenario in terms of advisor wellbeing. If you feel like a staff member might need support, will I make the presentation available? Yes, I will make the presentation available. The only thing that I would say though when I'm doing the presentation in terms of making the presentation available is unfortunately for all of us, the FASEA is a moving target. FASEA is a moving target, and the reason I've put internal only on some of these slides is because I know that FASEA is a moving target and things may change. And I urge you to contact me if you think in terms of your own individual situation, your own individual situation, the scenario that affects particular advisors. I'm still working through a number of advisors' personal circumstances in order to try and get them the best result. So please be patient with me while I do that. And I will be making changes as FASEA also makes changes, and I am aware of the information that I've got now, and I'll make changes based on what I understand. So I'm really looking forward to your support on that one.
All right. Very good.
Good.
More questions coming through. Thanks for your efforts. Well done,
Dee.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Sorry if appreciate our first time we've tried to do this.
All right. Well, I think it's worked pretty well. Thanks, everyone, for your time. I know everyone's very busy, and it's a Friday
there was
afternoon.
A question.
Oh, hang on. We missed
what chance does the FBA have in adding a year to finish the exams? Okay. All right. The Honourable Wayne Hughes. Okay, Wayne. There are two key things, right? And it comes down to the minister. The minister has an ability to make a determination and is actually built into corporations law to direct FASEA to do something. So that's the first thing. The question is, the second part is the dates are actually built into corporations law as to when everyone has to achieve various different requirements. So FASEA in themselves do not necessarily have the ability to do it. It comes down to a lot of strong and significant lobbying across the entire industry to try and push those dates out for the exams and for the educational requirements. Because I suspect the minister will say that this is beyond the bounds of corporations law, and that would be, from my research, both a change in both the House of Reps and the Senate in order to make that adjustment. We've still got questions. Will there be a handbook available with the material that needs to be studied for the exam?
Everyone that went to the PD days had a summary of all the material sent through to them by their ABC. So if you link back to the FASEA website, it has all the reading material, which is 6 binders full. So I don't think we're going to provide that for everyone.
Yeah, I think, though, I think we're actually on a strong bounds, Aussie. All right, it calls me a positive person. Guys, we built a lot of the stuff into, we built a lot of the stuff into the advice handbook. There's a lot of stuff that's been built into that. There is, in terms of the code, the advice and research team are working very hard in terms of building some of the requirements of the code into changes in terms of the question of the advice handbook. And part of the thing also is we learn as we go. So we've learned from our June advisors. I'm really looking forward to working with our September advisors. And I'll be taking the exam with the September advisors as well. So, gosh, I'm really lucky. So I think we've got ability for some flexibility and approach in terms of building a little bit more guidance, a study guide for advisors, but that sort of thing will really come into play more in terms of September. We don't know at this particular stage how the 3 advisors are going. They are probably in week 5 of waiting for their results. We will know in the next few weeks. With ethics and stuff like that, there are ethical courses that are up to play, that are in play. I know if you're an FPA member, there's ethical frameworks if you wanted to do that thing. I also suggest, I had a review of the Tower Risk Academy's exam preparation workshop. If you wanted to do that, I actually don't think it's a bad thing based on the questions that I've received. So certain things are happening at the same time.
Excellent. Certainly will be provided by us at every opportunity, but in terms of the corpse law and all that sort of stuff that we need to download on the FASEA website, you can have a good read of it there. It's going to take you a while, so in terms of preparation, B, how much do you think you need to study for this exam? Would you lock a few days away, or? In
terms of the study for the exam?
Yeah.
It comes down to whether or not you decide to, in terms of behavioural finance, in terms of the behavioural finance aspects, I really think that looking at the questions that came in the June exam, that it wasn't really that complicated. You just needed to understand that there was obviously a difference between an accumulator versus a retiree. You needed to understand there would be different biases in terms of investment options and so forth. There may be a bias in terms of ethics, and so forth. Because I'm not doing it with the Kaplan subject at the same time. I am actually focusing harder on the ethics end, and that's simply because that's the weighted parts of the exam that FASEA are marking at this particular point. So in terms of my personal study plan, I'm thinking essentially for me, pretty much I've got kids, pretty much 5 hours per week. I can't really sit there and say I'm going to stop working for 2 weeks before the exam at this particular point.
All right, well, I think that's it. No more questions have come through. B, thanks again for all your work.
Oh, thank you, Lozzie.
For anyone that doesn't know, B has put in hours and hours upon hours of work into doing all the mapping for everyone's qualifications, getting all the preparation materials. She's working late every single night. We see her here. So huge thank you from all the team.
Thank
you. Doing a tremendous job. If you've got any questions, got cpd@finia.com.au is the best email address. Fire them through. Send it through to your ABC if you like, and we can filter the questions through. We've also got another FAQ paper that we'll send out. So for everyone that dialed in, we'll send out the FAQs. We'll try our best to get this recording out in a legible format, and as well as all the other support material. So thanks again for your time and effort.
Thanks for your time today, guys. Have a good weekend.